Hi Rezwan, let's take a look at your essays today. Okay, school children, who has more influence, teachers or parents? Let's see. Experts throughout both the developing and developed world have debated whether children's intellectual and social skills are more influenced by the teachers or parents since the advent of this decade. All right, the sentence was fine until this. I'm not really a huge fan of this because this isn't just a recent decade question, it's just something in general, so I didn't really care for this. I believe teachers, without the apostrophe, play a crucial role during children's developmental phase without the, yet their upbringing by their parents or guardians can reflect on their abilities significantly. This essay will discuss both sides using examples from the UK government and Oxford University to demonstrate points and support arguments. Okay, now what's not clear to me is how much you agree with this, okay? So it kind of sounds like you disagree because I'm not really sure. I mean, it kind of sounds to me like a balanced essay. You're saying that they both affect children's development? I'm not really sure. So I would have liked your position here, whether you agree with this or not, to be a little clearer. All right, so on the one hand, there's ample evidence to suggest that parents have a major responsibility in assisting their offspring with homework tasks. So no apostrophe S, and here you need an S. As well as disciplining them to behave appropriately in and outside of the home. This is largely because children require a high level of support and commitment towards their academic performance and social skills. For example, this is borne out by a study conducted by the UK government that states parents spending more than 2 hours a day helping their children with homework, as well as additional time doing leisure activities, can have a tremendous impact on their abilities. That was a long sentence, 4 lines. Okay. Therefore, it is conclusively clear that parents play a vital role in the children's upbringing and their social behavior. All right, fine. Let's move on then. However, although some parents play a key role in nurturing their children, they are still unjustifiably far behind the role the teacher takes in their children's life. Teachers are the ideal role models for children due to the fact that they spend an enormous amount of time together in the classroom. For instance, a study led by Oxford University indicates that 60% of all children before the age of 12 aspire to become a teacher, mainly due to the influence their teacher has exerted upon them. Furthermore, children's social skills are a direct reflection of their behavior in the classroom and around friends. Whose behavior? The children's behavior or the teacher's behavior? I'm not sure. Thus, bearing in mind that teachers are vital figures in children's life, and they have remarkable... All right, you're missing part of a sentence here. Thus, bearing in mind that teachers are vital figures in children's life, comma, they have a remarkable influence over their intelligence. Intelligences, meaning like multiple types of intelligence? Okay, fine. And social skills. To conclude from the examples and arguments given, I firmly believe that teachers play a more significant role in the children's intellectual and social abilities in comparison to their counterparts, the parents. All right, not really a huge believer in this expression, their counterparts. Parents are not their counterparts. So you could have just said, in comparison to parents, and you would have been done. It would have been fine. Okay, well, there are some nice elements in this essay. There's some things I really like. I feel like you definitely developed this one more strongly than this one. I kind of felt like this part of the paragraph was rather weak. I mean, just your arguments were so-so. But, I mean, you wrote it well, so it was fine. Okay, good job with this. I'm pretty happy with it. So let's take a look at your second essay. Okay, so thank you so much for actually including the image. Let's take a look at what you wrote here. Excuse me for the cough. Okay. The bar chart shows forecasted Why are we talking about forecasted? It's not forecasted. Forecasted means is that it's what's predicted to happen, but it can't possibly be predicted because it's 2017, which is in the past, okay? So, it should be the bar chart shows sales by Intel and AMD in thousands in the year 2017. In January, AMD sales began at roughly 25. I wanted to see thousands here. 25,000. followed by a fourfold rise in sales, resulting in reaching a peak at approximately 120. Let me see that again. Okay. 120 in the subsequent month, and then sales slumped in the month of March to 40. While sales at Intel started at around 50, followed by a gradual rise over the next 2 months, reaching, around 90 in March. Okay. Towards the end of the second quarter, Intel reached a new peak of approximately 130, whilst AMD sales drooped to 0 in June. Okay. So there's some little, grammar problems here. Yeah, I wasn't crazy about this word drooped. You want to use words like dropped or plummeted, fell sharply, something. Now, apart from that, you really need, now you mentioned here that we were talking about in the thousands, but that's the only place you mentioned it. So you could have just written out the 3 zeros and you would have been fine. But as it stands right now, it looks like your data is inaccurate, okay? So be careful with that. You mentioned once that it's in thousands, but you still need to continue. Okay. In July, capital the J, AMD sales were 3 times higher than those of Intel, okay? Because the sales are higher than the sales, and you have to reflect that grammatically. So AMD sales were 3 times higher than those of Intel, followed by slight fluctuation in AMD sales over the third quarter at around 40 and 90 in August and capital A and September respectively. All right, let me look at what you're looking at. AMD 40, well, that's not really fluctuation, is it? Just for 2 months. Let's see. In July. So in July, you've got this high and then this low and then this high again. Okay. Let me see what you did here. So, followed by slight fluctuation over the third quarter at around. All right. I wouldn't have, I mean, since you're just referring to 2 months here, I don't know that I necessarily would have used fluctuation. Instead, what you could have said is that the following month it decreased to about half, or maybe even less than that, actually. But then the following month approached its July sales figures. I mean, something along those lines. Okay, while Intel sales remained fairly stable for the third quarter, I wouldn't have used while here, because it's almost as if it's connected to the previous sentence, but it's not. You could have just said, in contrast, Intel sales remained fairly stable for the third quarter at roughly 70,000 again. In the final quarter, AMD sales depreciated significantly to around 5 in November. 5? Okay, yeah. In comparison to Intel sales, which showed a rise to 110 before a slight fall in the final month to approximately 105 and 35 sales for Intel and AMD, respectively. Okay. Overall, there was no clear trend presented over the given time period. However, sales at Intel surpassed sales at AMD, and the lowest number of sales accounted. All right. So, and the lowest number of sales, I would have just said, were found in the month of June for AMD and July for Intel. Excuse me. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so you've done some nice things here. Again, my biggest problem is the fact that you haven't referred to these figures as thousands, except for the very, very beginning. That's probably for me the biggest problem. And then I almost wonder if it's a little too detailed. I kind of feel like it is. I think that perhaps what you could have done is rather than talk about quarters, you could have talked about like a half year. In fact, a lot of the really successful task ones that I have seen for this particular writing assignment is when students split the year in half, and that seems to work quite nicely. Because what happens is I almost feel like your answer here was a little too detailed. Another thing you could have done is, rather than mention, another thing that I want to mention before I say that is I didn't do a word count, but it did feel really rather long to me. I think I counted somewhere around 16 pieces of information. I think you mentioned 8 out of the 12 months. And I don't want to tell you that that's wrong, not necessarily. I just think that rather than giving so much data and so much information, you could have focused more on trends. So, in other words, what I'm suggesting might have lended itself to that. So take a look at this. If you had talked about Intel and said that in the first half of the year, it increased from this to this, and then again had a drop where it again increased, had the almost identical pattern. In contrast, AMD was consistently below 50,000, except for the month of February when it had this huge spike to 110, and in June where it had no sales at all. Okay, so I've pretty much told you the same information, but in a much more concise way. And then the second half of the year is really very different. The low point for Intel is obviously in July, but after that it surpasses 50,000 for 3 months, and then 100,000 for another 2 months. On the other hand, it's very difficult to find any sort of pattern for AMD because it starts the half of the year very strong at over 100,000, but then dips and then increases again, and then, really plummets in November to finish the year out here at around 30,000 or whatever that number is, okay? So why am I doing this? I just wanted to give you another suggestion on how you could have organized your answer and maybe avoided using so many of these little numbers like, well, AMD was this, and then Intel was this, and then AMD was this, and Intel was this. So I think maybe, I don't know, it might just make for a better overall picture if you did it like that. It's just a suggestion. Of course, as I always say, there is more than one way to do task 1. And you've done a nice job, okay? So now what you need to do, of course, is correct these for us. Correct them, add to your error correction list, and send us new essays. We're here, we're waiting for them. So go ahead and start writing, and I'll be looking forward to your next essays. Good luck.